you see the title slide?
Yes, we
Right.
can.
Okay. And I appreciate the invitation to come. Thank you. I actually was also an advisor for Walker Fellows back when I was working in the College of Business. But as Jackie mentioned, I've been gone for a couple of years, but I'm still in touch. I'm still in touch with the dean and with Linda Besner and those within the college. So congratulations to all of y'all for being part of the College of Business. If you are part of the College of Business, and if not, so glad you're at Appalachian State. It's a great university. As she stated, I have 3 degrees from App, and I'm very proud to be an App grad. So we will get started. I call this the College Graduate Financial Literacy, so that you know kind of what to expect, you know what may be coming after you graduate. All right. So you have a new job. Some of you may have a new job, and if you do, congratulations. Now what? I have a question for you. Does gross pay equal net pay? I imagine most of you know the answer to that. No, because we have common deductions that come out of our paychecks, those that are mandated by law, such as FICA. FICA is the Federal Insurance Contributions Act, also known as the Social Security Act or Social Security tax. It is 6.2% currently. And if you make more than $142,800, you won't have to pay any more beyond that point. If you make more than that, great. But that is what the law is right now. There is also the Medicare tax. This is 1.45%, and it is taxed. You have to pay that on any amount that you make. You know, you can make $1 million and you would still have to pay this 1.45% in Medicare tax. Then we have, of course, our favorite federal income tax that gets withheld. We get state income tax that's withheld. So those are our mandated deductions, the taxes. Then we have voluntary deductions. For example, health insurance, retirement plans, and we'll talk a lot more about that in just a few minutes. We have flex plans. We have other insurances such as vision, dental, life insurance, accidental death, disability, short-term disability, so there are a myriad of voluntary deductions depending on what your employer offers you. Some employers allow you to deduct charitable contributions, and they may have some other things that they allow you to withhold from your check. So we're going to do an example here. I'm going to do a pay for 1 month. We're going to assume $25 an hour for 40 hours a week. And there's 4 weeks in a month, let's say February. You're a single taxpayer claiming 1 deduction. You're contributing 4% to the 401k and $50 for your flex plan. And just a word about flex plans. You may or may not be familiar with those. Those came out pretty much right after I started in the workforce, which was back in 1987. They are plans in which you can have their pre-tax dollars. You withhold pre-tax dollars from your check. It goes into an account that you can use for deductibles or co-pays or other things that are not covered by your insurance. You can use it to pay for glasses and dental work. And I'll give you my experience, case in point. I do not carry dental insurance, nor do I carry vision insurance, because I sat down and ran the numbers. When I go to the dentist, I get 2 cleanings a year. They do x-rays, and that's pretty much all I have, which is a lot less than the premiums I would have to pay. So I elect to assume the risk and use my flex plan to pay all those expenses. It's really simple, and I encourage you to use it. Again, it's pre-tax dollars, so you don't have to pay tax on it. All right, so our gross pay is $4,000 for this 1 month. We're withholding 4%, so we have $160 coming out for our 401k. Then we have our flex plan of $50, leaving taxable wages of $3,790. So let's take that and go look at our mandated deductions. We have our taxable wages here of $3,790, mandated deductions of FICA, again, 6.2% is $235, Medicare is $55, federal income tax withholding is $311, state income tax withholding is $143, for total mandated deductions of $744. And for these federal income tax withholdings and state income tax withholdings, your employer will have tables that are published by the feds and the state, and considering, you know, depending on what kind of filing status you have, how many deductions, dependents, whatever you file on, I believe it's the W-4, it's been a while since I've done one, that's what they will use to withhold your federal and state income tax. They have them for weekly pay, they have it for bi-weekly pay, they have it for monthly, they even have it for semi-annually. So there's a tax table for any situation. So in this case, our total deductions are $744, and our pay before our other voluntary deductions is $3,046. If we have no other deductions like health insurance or anything like that, then that's what your take home would be. But in this case, we do have a few. We're gonna, oh, I'm sorry, I need to go to this. Let's say you don't do a 401k and a flex. I'm gonna kind of digress a little bit here. So your taxable wages then are $4,000 because you're not withholding your 401k, you're not withholding a flex plan. So you're paying more in taxes. Remember, the previous screen was $744 of deductions. Well, now it's $801 of mandated taxes that you're gonna have to pay. So it's a difference of $57. So that brings the pay before other voluntary deductions, you know, we'll move on to that in a little bit. So that pay is $3,199. So let's compare the two. All right, this is between the one that it's without 401k and flex, which is the one we just looked at, which is $3,199. Then if we do withhold 401k and flex, it's $3,046 for a difference of $153. And you say, oh my gosh, Talana, I could take home I could have $153 extra to buy stuff or whatever you're going to do with it. Well, maybe. Here's the law. Here's what you need to look at and consider though. If you do not do a 401k, you lose out on some free money. This is the employer match. That's why, that's why I gave some percentages just a little while ago. 4% is an amount, some people withhold 3, some do 4, some do 6, some do even more than that. But depending on what your employer is going to match, you need to withhold at least that much. So in this case, this particular employee would have done 4. And this is what that employee would lose out on is $160. So really, you don't have $153, you're losing $7 per pay period. Now granted, I know you can't get to the 401k right now, but this is a savings plan. This is so you can retire in several years and not wonder where your money's coming from. Just FYI, this 401k, this is known as a defined contribution rather than a defined benefit. The old pension plans were defined benefit plans. Those are pretty much going the way of the dodo bird. So now it's 401k, 403b. There may be some other types of retirement plans that are qualified to be taken or to be done pre-tax. Okay, so you're losing, in essence, $7 a pay period. Let's say you work from age 22 until 65, which is 43 years. And your return on an investment, average return is generally about 10% annually, give or take. It depends on how you have invested things. So that would be $421.68 over 43 years. What I did was compound it. But that's just for one pay period. If you did all those pay periods over 43 years, and again, we're assuming that you're never going to get a raise, you're never going to change employers or anything like that. This is just to give you an example of how this works. Even though you're losing $7 each payroll over 43 years, in the end, it'll cost you about $50,000 over those 43 years. But the biggest loss, and I want you to prepare yourselves for this next number that you're going to see, is the $160 free money match that you would not get from your employer because you elect not to do a 401k. Here it is. $1,137 in 43 years that you will have given up. That's why I strongly encourage you to withhold as much, whatever the employer match is, have that much withheld from your paycheck so that you will get this $1,137,000 plus whatever you've saved and the income that has accrued on it. Very important, very important. Okay, let's move along to net pay after voluntary deductions. In this case, we're going to assume, and these are numbers I just pulled out of the air, okay? I don't base this on anything. I just, for ease of calculation. We'll assume that the company charges the employee $150 per month for health insurance for a single person. This is not family, this is just a single person. And assume that some of the other deductions, your insurances are going to cost $100 a month. So here's the $3,046 that is after the 401k. This is our 401k pay before the voluntary deductions. And here's the health insurance, $100 for a total of $250. And here's how much cash you're going to take home, $2,796. You also need to be aware for some of these other voluntary deductions, some companies charge for parking. Appalachian State is one that does. So you would probably have to take that into account. Some companies also have, self-contained cafeterias where you can charge your meal on your ID card that automatically goes into the payroll system and is withheld from your paycheck. But I didn't put any of that in here. It's just to let you know, those are things you need to look at and consider with your employer. So here is your net take-home pay, $2,796. All right. And also based on your filing status, this is just kind of a note that I want you to know. You could take home between 55 and 80% of gross, depending on your filing status, depending on the deductions you make. This particular example that I've given you is around 67%. So that's just a little side note. We've talked a little bit about savings and retirement. And again, I can't stress enough, contribute to those, that 401k or the 403b, at least as much as will be matched. Again, some employers do 3, 4, 5, or 6. The max I have seen is 6%, but there may be some that match more than that. Again, your contribution comes off the top. It is not taxed now. It's taxed when you retire, when you probably won't have as much income, and they anticipate you having lower income then, because you really won't need as much, because your house should be paid off. You shouldn't have car payments, so you really don't need as much. So that's the theory. And again, don't pass up free money. This is kind of a rule of thumb to have as an emergency fund. Just set aside $1,000. And the sooner you can get that set aside, the better, because if things are going to happen, your car's going to break down, you're going to need new tires, you're going to need something for your apartment or your home, or something's going to happen. And this will at least give you some start of a cushion in the beginning. Now, rule of thumb is, rule of thumb is to also have, when you're established in your job and you're getting paid every month, go ahead and set aside money of 6 months worth of expenses, so that if something happens with your job, if, heaven forbid, you're laid off, or the company goes out of business, anything can happen, or you're sick or you're hurt and you can't work. You need to have that money set aside so that you can use it for expenses that you're kind of like Aflac. Supposedly it pays for things that insurance doesn't pay. It's similar to that, but it's your own personal, all your personal expenses that you would need to pay in the event something were to happen like that. You can also deposit an amount directly into a savings account from your paycheck. Most employers allow you to deposit at least into 2 accounts. So people will do a checking and a savings. Now, today is the time to set a budget. You say, well, how do I set a budget? How do I know how to do that? First, you determine how much money you will bring home in a given period. So most expenses have to be paid monthly. So you might want to consider your monthly budget. I've known some people who do a weekly budget because they get paid weekly. You have to determine what's going to work best for you. You estimate your expenses. For things that are paid quarterly or semi-annually or even annually, you need to set aside enough each month to pay it so that when it comes due, it's not a surprise, because you're going to have to pay it. Car insurance, that's going to come up 2 times a year, like clockwork. So set enough aside every 6 months so that you can pay it and it's not a big burden on you. Build it into your budget. You need to assign every dollar that you bring home to something. This is called a zero-based budget. And this is where it gets it's almost thinking backwards, but it works. Here's another, if you don't hear anything else that I've said, hear this. Live within your means. Don't try to impress the neighbors. Don't try to impress your friends. Live within your means, because if you don't, it will get you into some trouble, some financial trouble that could impact your life in the future. So please just live within your means. If you can't afford to do something, don't do it. Just, because there will come a time that you can do it. If you do what I'm telling you to do, there will come a time that you will have money set aside, then you can do anything you want. I subscribe to Dave Ramsey. Some of you may be familiar with him. One of the things he says, and I've always loved this, is live like no one else now, so that later you can live like no one else. And that's what happens. If you do these things, then you will be able to live like no one else. Stick to your budget. That's very important also. All right, let's talk about some monthly expenses we might incur. We have basic living needs. Everybody has to have food. We have to buy food. We have to live somewhere. So we're going to have a rent. We're going to have rent, or we're going to have a mortgage. Then there'll be utilities for wherever we live. Most places that rent don't pay the utilities. There may be a few, but I know when I was in apartments, I had to pay the utilities. You're going to have transportation to get to work. So you may have a car payment. I hope you don't, but you may. You have to buy gas, you have to buy oil, you're going to have maintenance, all that kind of good stuff. You're going to have a cell phone. We pretty much can't live without cell phones. When I got out of college, there was no such thing. In fact, I think they had those big, they were long, they were about that tall, of satellite phones. And then they had car phones. But now, as you know, the cell phone does just about everything. So we got to have that. Auto insurance, I've talked about, we've got a budget for that. You may or may not have student loan payments. The nice thing about graduating from Appalachian is that your student loan payment should be fairly low. It's some of the lowest in the state. I was looking at some statistics a couple of days ago, and sure enough, Appalachian, of all the UNC system universities, I think we're third from the bottom, or having the least of student loan debt. So that's great. Of course, you'll have maintenance and repairs, homeowners or renters insurance. If you rent, please be sure you get renters insurance, because if something happens to that apartment complex, that apartment unit, the person who owns the apartments doesn't have insurance to cover your contents. So if you don't have renter's insurance to cover those contents and that place burns down, there's nothing you can do, because his or her insurance will not cover it. So renter's insurance is cheap. At least when I was having to get it, it was very cheap. So that's something you definitely need to consider. And also keep in mind that insurance protects your assets. And that's all insurance is supposed to do, protect your assets. Here is where I talk about establishing an emergency fund. Then, I want you to have fun. I want you to have some entertainment. You need to do that. That's important. We all need to have entertainment. You may want to put some in savings if you have more that you can save. And you may have some other expenses. You'll know what kind of expenses that you'll have. All right, I did do a little bit of research. I looked at Charlotte just because it's close by. I know a lot of our grads will go to Charlotte to work. So I've pulled some stuff from there. These are, and this is just an example. So average rent in Charlotte is $1,290. Could be a little less, could be a little more, but that's just the average of all rental properties. Food on average for a person is going to be between $250 and $300 a month. Again, these are per month. Your utilities, the average for electricity and gas, $170. A car payment. Again, I hope you don't have a car payment, but on average, most car payments are around $400. The gas for the car, depending on the size of car you have, if you have a big old Range Rover, it'll cost you a little more than $22 a week, but on average, it would be about $22. Cell phone, around $70. You can get it cheaper, that's great. Student loan payments, the average is around $305. Hopefully Appalachian, if you get a degree from Appalachian, it's less. Your auto insurance, the monthly cost would be $42. Keep in mind you pay it every 6 months. And then other insurance, other maintenance, I estimated around $50. And then your contribution to your emergency fund, again, I just put in $100 here. It would take you about 10 months to build that $1,000. Then, so how much are you going to have left for entertainment, fun, and disposable income? That's always the question mark. You can And it's going to be the difference between what you bring home, the cash you bring home, and what your other expenses cost you. So let's look. All right, we're going to start with our net take-home pay of $2,796, and then we're going to assign all of the dollars to the categories. And I'm assuming you are renting in this example and not owning a home, because owning a home brings other expenses with it. All right, total expenses of those that we just looked at on the previous page are $2,765, which in this example, it leaves you $31. Now, if you cut back on how much you put towards your emergency fund every month, instead of the $100, maybe $50, that'll give you a little bit more, but I do encourage you to get that thing built as soon as possible. So we're going to go back to our example over here, and we're going to put the $31 here. Wait a minute, something just happened. I don't know what it did. Okay, yeah, so now you've got your adjusted total expenses, and you've told your money to go to places. You've told it where to go. It has not told you where it's going to go. And that's another Dave Ramsey thing. He's always big on tell your money where to go. Don't let it run you. So this is a zero-based budget. You brought in $2,796. You had adjusted total expenses of $2,796. So you have a zero-based budget. And again, it's just an example. It will be different for every person. So what about debt? My philosophy, and I've always been this way. I did not learn this from Dave Ramsey. This has been a Talana Bell thing since she was a little girl. Stay away from it if at all possible. Now I realize there will be some debt that you will incur possibly over your lifetime. If you want to buy a home and you need to take out a mortgage, you're going to have to do that. Again, live within your means. Don't go buy something that's way beyond what you really can afford. Just because you can afford the payments does not mean you can afford the home. Credit cards, if you are responsible and with your money and you can keep up with how much you owe on credit cards and you can pay it off every month, carry a zero balance. Whenever that statement comes and it gives you the due date, you pay it by the due date so that, yeah, you have interest-free money, but if you miss that due date and you miss that payment, you get lovely penalties and lovely interest. So it's just, if you cannot handle that, then use a debit card, because the debit card can also be used as a credit card. The difference is it automatically comes out of your account. So you don't have to worry about paying a bill because it's already come out. Just word to the wise. Pay off that student loan as soon as you possibly can. Some employers, and this is a good question to ask, when you're negotiating with a potential employer, ask them if they will pay your student loan off, especially if what your degree is very specialized. Ask them if they will help you pay off that student loan. Yes, you may be taxed on it, but at least you won't have to pay all of the student loan. It's just a way to get around it. Don't buy a new car. Wait, it's fine to buy a used one. In fact, I looked at Credit Karma, and the average monthly car payment for a brand new vehicle is $568. It's $397 for a used vehicle. So, there's a big savings there. Do not lease a car. And the reason being that you're going to have these payments every month, and they're usually, according to Credit Karma, those lease payments average about $467 a month, which, I had estimated a car payment at $400. So that's even $67 more. Don't lease them. They kind of get you in that, and you end up in a vicious circle, because you have to go and you have to lease the next latest and greatest thing. And if you go over the mileage, then they make you purchase it at market value, which their market value is going to be a whole lot more than the Blue Book. Just again, word to the wise. It's better in the car business to purchase than to lease. And if you can purchase a used car, that's even better. I said, do not lease a car. Okay. Mortgage. Again, you're probably going to want to buy a home at some point, and you're probably going to have to take out a mortgage. So let's look at rent versus home ownership. You have to determine what's best for you. If you prefer to rent for a few years until you can save up enough to do a down payment, then that's the way you need to go. But you also need to understand that with home ownership comes other operational costs. You're going to have property taxes. When you rent, you don't pay property taxes. You have to pay property tax on your car, but not on your home. You're going to have homeowners insurance. Homeowners insurance is a whole lot more than renter's insurance. And you're going to have to pay for maintenance of the home. And I can tell you, things go wrong in the home. I've had more expenses this year than I have in the last 3 years. Things like toilets running and the water heater not being vented correctly. That set me back a good amount. The roof has to be replaced. Just things like that. You need to take those into consideration. Again, just because you can afford the monthly mortgage payment does not mean that you can afford the home. So you have to consider all of these extra costs whenever you own a home. And I love owning a home. As soon as I got out of college, I wanted to own a home, but I knew that I couldn't do it. So you're going to have monthly utility costs. Generally, I've got trash collection here. Generally, at an apartment complex, they have a big dumpster, so you don't get charged separately for that. You may have to pay for your electricity and gas, and maybe water in an apartment. But again, an apartment's going to be smaller than a home, so you've got to take these into account. You may have homeowner association fees. Usually those are annual dues that you have to pay. Again, live within your means. And with that, live long and prosper, debt-free and wealthy. That is my prayer, my hope for all of you. So, and I will stop sharing and see if there are any questions. Let me back up here.
Talana, I'll go ahead and start things off here with questions. I wondered if you have any recommendations for managing a budget monthly. I know there's lots of apps out there that you can pay for, but you have to subscribe to those. Or is it best to do a spreadsheet and keep up with that on your own? Do you have recommendations for that?
If you don't want to invest in an app, which I don't, I just would use a spreadsheet. And again, you can set up the columns however you want to, all the rows as you want to, and you can track your expenses. Now, I will say I do have Quicken. I use Quicken for my own personal expenses, and it also has a budget tool in it. But, if you just have a simple budget where you've got all those items itemized and you put the dollars in that need to go to those items, it's pretty easy to track that way for your zero-based budget. And if you're paid like on a commission, or you're not always guaranteed the amount, you might want to estimate what you think you're going to bring in, and again, do your budget according to the way you're paid. Because if you're paid every week, then you could do a weekly budget. but you need to be sure that you take into consideration those monthly expenses and when they are due to be able to pay them on time. So that's why, you know, maybe you could set your spreadsheet up and you have all your weeks and then you total them, and then you can see where your money is going for every single week. Is there a question in the chat?
Just a recommendation for a free budget app every $1. So that's good to know.
That's great. Yeah, just because I don't do that necessarily for a living. I am not a financial counselor or anything like that, or a financial advisor. I can tell you how to do things. I just can't tell you what to do and, you know, what to invest in. If you have someone that can be a financial advisor for you, I encourage you to talk with them and get them to help you get this set up. I mean, you know, there are plenty of people out there who do that for a living. I'm just not one of them. And if you're interested in going to a Dave Ramsey or reading up on his stuff, he has a program called Financial Peace. I was actually a coordinator for that through my church, and we were able to reach some people and show them how to budget using his method. So that's also an option to look at. I think he has some free resources on his website, daveramsey.com, I believe is what it is. Anything else? I didn't take the full hour, but I talk fast when I present because I don't do this very often.
Might I interject for a quick minute?
Sure.
Sorry, I submitted my question somewhat late, so I don't know if it completely went through, but I was just wondering in regards to like negotiating for a job like right out of undergrad, you had mentioned possibly them assisting with student loans and stuff. I was wondering, kind of along the same vein, if you were interested in going to graduate school and you were going to be getting like a specialized degree that is applicable in the field that you are going to be working in for that company, would it be unreasonable to try to negotiate, I don't know a better way to word it, but yes, tuition assistance, thank you.
Sure. Absolutely, because some companies offer that as a benefit. Appalachian, for example, I mean, there is a benefit that's offered to all staff to get a degree. You know, there is some tuition assistance there. So by all means, ask if that is one of the perks that they give, and if not, ask them if they'd be willing. You know, that's perfectly fine to ask. How much money do you think someone needs to have saved up before they can own a home? Depends on what kind of home that you want to purchase. Generally, if you're able to put down 20% of the cost of the home, then you won't have to buy mortgage insurance and all that kind of stuff. And you know, it's a good, solid down payment. But it, you know, it depends on what kind of home you're looking at. If you're, you know, $100,000 home, that would be $20,000 that you would need to save. But at some point, hopefully, you're going to save enough to be able to, in the future, you know, if that's just a starter home and you want something else, maybe you'll be able to pay cash for it. That's the goal, is to be able to pay cash and not have to be in debt. Because again, you know, with that debt, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to keep working, I've got to keep working. And if you know, if you save, if you're frugal and follow your budget, assign your dollars to everything, then you probably may be able to retire before age 65 if you so choose. I was able to retire from the healthcare system. I chose to do that because I could. And then when I came back to school and decided to stay at App, I went back to work. But because there are only so many times you can clean the house and and do all that and walk around the neighborhood. And, I didn't have anybody to travel with at the time. So it wasn't going to be, that wasn't going to be fun. So anyway, I think you all can accomplish that. And I was 55 at that time. So.
Can I elaborate on my question a little bit more too?
Sure.
I guess I know some people think home ownership seems more I don't know what the word is, but better just because you it's an asset. And so when you want to move, you can sell that home. But when you've put money towards rent for an apartment, you don't get anything back once you move out.
That's
so
true.
What do you think are the pros and cons for that?
Well, and again, personally, I prefer home ownership. I think because it is an asset and you are contributing toward an asset that you can sell in the future and put toward another home. And there are two schools of thought. With rent, you don't have to worry about some of those other expenses. I think in the beginning, when you first start your job, you probably should rent until you know for sure that you're gonna maybe stay in that area, or until you have the money to be able to invest in a home and be able to cover all the expenses that come with it. Again, it's not just the mortgage payment, it's the homeowner's insurance, it's the property taxes. And I can tell you, property taxes in Boone are pretty high for me. So just, those are the things that you have to consider. And, I know in Charlotte, they're high, but at Raleigh, some of the larger metropolitan areas. So it's, I think it's fine to start out. I don't think it is a long-term thing to do unless you're going to be moving a lot. You've got to take that into account. How many times do you foresee changing jobs? Because I know we change jobs more often now than we used to. Used to be a worker would stay at a company for 50 years. That doesn't happen anymore. We have a lot of employees at Appalachian who've been here for 40, but some of those are retiring now, and younger workers are just not staying in one place. They've become much more mobile. So that's another thing you need to take into consideration. Does that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
You're welcome. And hi, Maureen. I don't think we've met. I've seen your name.
Hello. Thank you for doing this for us this evening. It's very informative and helpful.
I hope so. And I am more than willing to talk with anybody. If you want to talk one-on-one, I'm more than willing to do that. I'm over in academic affairs. My extension is 2070, and my email is belltj@AppState. Because I want you to be successful when you leave Appalachian.
Well, thank you so much for your time tonight, Talana. I really appreciate it. We can tell that you love interacting with students. So I hope that this was helped fueled you a little bit as well. But are there any other questions before we wrap up tonight? Or if anybody wants to hang back for a few minutes, as we wrap up, you can talk to Talana for a minute or two as well. So, all right. Well, thank you so much.